What's going on, guys? I am hopping on here to continue our All in ACL graduate series. Going to be talking to Kaylee Swearingen, who's a graduate of ours, who started with us after an ACL reconstruction and meniscal capsular repair. I'm going to actually invite her in now. What's going on, Kaylee? How are you?
Oh, I'm good. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. Here, I'm just going to throw my headphones in here as well. Give me 1 second. All right. Hey, can you hear me?
Yep. Can you hear me?
I can. Thanks so much for joining us. This is number 5 for us, so we're getting into a little bit of a flow here. Yeah, so I'm gonna let you introduce yourself. But yeah, this is Kaylee. She's a graduate of our program. She started with us after an ACL reconstruction with a meniscal capsular repair. Yeah, but I'll let you take it away. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of background, history, basic bio stuff.
Perfect. So thank you for having me. Um, Hello to whoever else is on here also suffering from ACL torture. Um, my name is Kaylee Swearingen. I'm based out of Chicagoland. What I call everyone whenever I talk about it is I exploded my knee. I tore my ACL, complete ACL tear, and had my meniscus pop off the bone basically playing charity kickball, and that was in June of 22. And then I had surgery in July of 2022, so just like a month afterwards. Mine was kind of a weird one because, at least for me, like I went to the orthopedic surgeon and he was like, "Oh, I think this isn't ACL, so like this isn't going to be the worst case scenario for you." He's like, "I'm not sure, but let's do an MRI." Get the MRI, and he's like, "Actually, it's a full ACL tear, and you also have this issue with your meniscus, so you are going to be non-weight bearing, and we have to do surgery to do a complete ACL reconstruction," which is good now, but it was very scary at the time. And for me, I actually got to pick which type of ACL I like
Correct.
what kind of graft I wanted. So I did some of my own investigation, and for me, I picked a hamstring tendon as my graft for my ACL, and then for my meniscus, fortunately, they were able to repair it, so I didn't have any cutting out of it, but they basically like re-stitched it to the bone. Um, and yeah, then I was non-weight bearing for I think 8 weeks after my surgery. Um, and yeah, so that's kind of what happened between the first that was the first 3 months of my injury.
Yeah, and I think what made your injury unique was obviously the ACL reconstruction on its own is unique, but the meniscal repair and the meniscal detachment and the 8 weeks of non-weight bearing. And I looked it up before this call. You were non-weight bearing prior to surgery as well, right?
Yeah.
So when we looked at it, it was really like 2.5 months in total of non-weight bearing, which has a tremendous impact on your quad strength and just where you're at when we look at the protocol. So we're going to get into kind of that recovery, but talk a little bit about, obviously volleyball and your athletic history and your background and kind of, hobbies, interests, basic stuff like that.
Yep. So I was a athlete all my life, still am. So I played volleyball and track all through high school. Went to college for track. I did the heptathlon. After track ended in college, kind of like wrapped up, I went back to volleyball and was playing a ton in like bar leagues, like sand leagues, indoor leagues. I was playing like as much as I could volleyball wise. And then I was coaching, but I also did lots of other things like skiing. I horseback riding, running. I was training for a triathlon when I exploded my knee and tore my ACL. I do all sorts of different things, but volleyball was like the biggest one, and I was like most sad and missed that the most once I tore my ACL and had to wait 2 years to get back to actually playing again.
Yeah, and talk a little bit about, because I think one of the biggest things, talk about what first piqued your interest with all an ACL, and what made you, yeah, want to seek out something like this and be attracted to it.
So I don't remember. I was following some other like Instagram thing and I somehow saw you, Tommy. I don't know if you like did an interview or like you were just sharing content that got reshared there. And I was like, oh, what's this? And I just kind of like stumbled upon your profile. But for me, the biggest thing was I had never had such a major injury in my life. Like I've had like broken bones and things like that, but I haven't had something as like debilitating as this was. And for me, like it was really scary to not know like what was going to happen. And I'd seen so many, like being a college athlete, you hear of so many different people, and just like watching professional sports, you see like the impacts that it has to people where they're out for a year or a year and a half. And to me, I was just kind of nervous of if I'm not a professional athlete or a college athlete anymore, and I'm going through the same thing that these people do who have like teams of people built around them to help them succeed and get back to sports. Like I just was really skeptical of how that was going to be. And I know like I've had broken bones and like done physical therapy before. So like I knew kind of like the background of like how PT has gone. But I just was, I was just got a little hesitant of like what my future would look like if I didn't have like a whole bunch of people supporting me to get me back to like what I want to do.
No, that's a great point. And talk a little bit about, yeah, you had some prior experience with PT and kind of how that, yeah, kind of compared and contrast with, what this was and how this was different. And I think almost coming in, because a lot of times when we first started, even when you joined, right now we've grown a ton. We have a lot of people like you share their story. So we have a lot more people who start on their first injury in the early stages, recognizing, either pre-ab or immediately post-op, recognizing what a big deal this injury is. But back when you first joined, a lot of the people who started early on were people who, yeah, had a prior injury, and unfortunately we're kind of like, hey, I trust the process, 9, 12 months, I'll be back, and then they suffered a re-tear, and then they kind of sought out additional things on their second and third injury. So I'm curious what made you, I feel like almost that knowledgeable even back then when we didn't have as many stories, to say, hey, you know what, this is something I definitely want to do, and maybe it was your prior PT experience, but yeah, if you could talk a little bit to that.
So I think it was prior PT experience, but I also just I'm like an investigator. So for me, like once this happened, like I just started Googling a lot and I just like investigated like what does this situation look like? And everything I had seen was around like really strong success of ACL rehab is actually a lot of prehab. So when I went to my orthopedic surgeon, like I had asked, like, is there really anything I could do? And like because of my meniscus issue, like I really couldn't do that much to get myself like prepared pre-surgery to get into like success after surgery. So I had seen a lot of that, and then I had just seen so much around like having to go through all like the rebuilding of your muscle and all of that. So for me, I just knew I was gonna have to like with the complications of a meniscus injury with it. I just felt like, oh God, like this is not as like easy. This is not as I can start walking the day I have surgery. I had to wait forever. And I think like just like a little glimpse behind it, like I could tell right away how different standard PT was versus PT that I ended up doing with you was like literally night and day. Nothing against like PTs who are in an office like supporting multiple different people with all sorts of different injuries, but it was a completely different experience. It seems like, I mean, it was good. Like I got a lot of good stuff out of it, especially with like the hands-on stuff that they could actually massage out your muscles and like get all that out. But as far as like long-term success, like that just wasn't going to be the path for me. I feel like I remember probably like 3 months in, like it seemed like things were fine. And I was like supplementing my in-person PT with stuff that I was doing with you. But I think once I hit like 4 or 5 months in, maybe it was even 6 months. I remember going to my orthopedic surgeon talking about, I was 6 months post-op, and he was like, all right, are you ready to start running? And I was like, I can't even walk up and down stairs well. Like, we were on two different planets of where I should be. And I remember talking to you and being like, this is the most like devastating situation. Like, I was just at my surgeon. He thought I should be running at this point. And I remember, like, I think shortly after that or right before that, my PT in person was like, all right, let's start doing ladders. And I remember you being like, do you really think this is worth it? Like, can you just stop going to them because they're going to get you hurt? So
Yeah.
that was kind of like, at least like pretty early on for me. Like, I saw like how different it was, and like how their expectations were entirely different. And like, not to their own fault, like they're just not in the, like, they don't have the breadth and depth that like you do of like all this stuff. So it was dramatically different of an experience. Like, it was very much like, here's where you should be, but not really taking into account like where you are today. And there was definitely not a single layer of testing involved to see if you're ready to progress to next stages with them in person. So just the lack of science and reason behind when you should be able to move on to the next phases of your recovery just wasn't there with real PT or in-person PT. So like, working with you was like an entirely different experience of like actually reviewing data and numbers and knowing where you should be and how you should be progressing was like just night and day difference.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate that. And I think that's, yeah, such a great point. What we always say is we never tell anyone not to go to in-person PT, right? And exactly like you said, particularly those first 3 months, right? You've had a trauma, right? You've had a trauma surgery. There's some, room for manual treatment that may help you, right? But if you are relying on manual treatment beyond 3 months, that's a programming issue, right? Why do you need massages weekly, right? Why are you struggling with range of motion if they're really focusing on that manual treatment to help you? It's because you're being overloaded somewhere and you're underprepared somewhere in your program, right? And I think, for you, what's unfortunate and unfortunate, particularly with the meniscal repair, I want to like reiterate of like the typical pattern we see with people is they're underloaded early on and then they're rapidly overloaded. But that's doubly so with a meniscal repair, right? Was that, hey, you might hear 6 months and it's like, oh, 6 months, you should be doing this, and this. But it's like, but did we really talk about it? And then just say you were non-weight bearing for 2.5 months? That's
Yeah.
very substantial. That's you are literally comparing apples to oranges, or not even. You're comparing apples to something that's not a fruit when you've been non-weight bearing for that long. And it seems like, oh, it's a little minute detail, but it's a big fucking deal. And it would, put you in a very dangerous situation to be working on that. And that is why we test, right? Obviously, that's why we build this custom and then test. Talk a little bit about, because yeah, obviously when we came to that like critical point of like, hey, you can't be doing the agility ladder if you're not strong enough to go downstairs and not passing our testing criteria. But talk a little bit about starting during the non-weight bearing period, because that's something that I think a lot of people feel like, oh, I'm non-weight bearing, I'm kind of in a holding pattern, I can't do much. But talk about how that helped you and why you feel that was important, and would maybe recommend it to people.
Yeah, so I barely remember at that point. I feel like we started like almost right on the cusp of when I was like moving over to weight
Mhm.
bearing, not weight bearing, but I remember we still did stuff to like start activating my quad and start like continuing range of motion. Like, range of motion was a big part of it, even though strength training was also a major part, and especially like getting further down the line of like returning to sport. But I remember we still did like a lot of range of motion stuff, and like even stuff beyond like what my PT was telling me to do. Like, I think about like, I don't even remember. I think it was more like when I was in-person PT, they did the stim, but I was also doing stim and like had my own little thing that you had
Yeah.
recommended early on, which really helped me because I remember I was having such a hard time of getting my quad to fire like at all. So having that extra like stimulation to try to like waken it up, I definitely think that helped. And then even just like focusing on range of motion, and just, I think even more than that is just like peace of mind of like, I have a real plan. Like, there is progress, there are stepping stones. And then I know for me personally, I really struggled with the mental piece of it. I felt like I was like instant into like depression, sadness, like super feeling left out. And a lot of like the mental check-in points that we had every week, like just made me feel like, okay, I'm not insane. There's a whole bunch of other people that are going through the same thing as me. And just knowing like it's kind of just part of it at that point. And focusing on like key wins, little wins, small wins, big wins, all that stuff really helped me see like, okay, there is progress even though you don't see it or feel it right now and you're not walking or you're not doing what you used to do before. There are still things like, oh my gosh, I got my quad to fire today. Or, oh my gosh, I did like banded knee extension and my knee didn't immediately like, or my quad actually started to like flex and I didn't feel it so much in my knee. Or like after doing those things, having my knee like feel better instead of feeling like it was more strained. So for me, I think it was a lot of just honestly the mental piece of it too. Just like
Yeah.
that was a huge part for me.
Yeah. No, I think, and that mental piece is so, I think a lot of people, and what we've talked about previously is having that plan where you wake up every day knowing exactly what you need to do, why you're doing it, how you're doing it, how it fits into the larger process. And hey, how do you go from where you are now, which is non-weight bearing, having been non-weight bearing for 8 weeks, to then playing volleyball, landing, bumping into a teammate and, landing on one leg and, feeling comfortable and confident doing that. All of those things are, having it instead of just saying, hey, I'm relying on faith that I'm going to get there. Waking up every day, knowing what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it, seems to help people from both that physical and that mental perspective. And I think range of motion, yes, but even strength wise, you're gonna atrophy, right, when you're non-weight bearing for that long. But laying a bit of a foundation to get your quad firing, these minute details during the non-weight bearing period really make a big difference in how you come out of it, right? And it's even some of the things we're able to do open chain and isometrically can really make a big difference when you first start to walk. And I think that's another thing we really talked about was the understanding of going from non-weight bearing to gradually weight bearing and using your crutches for a period of time. And that was something I remember that they were kind of encouraging, like, okay, you can bear weight, like let's get rid of those crutches. And it's like, you need to gradually decrease the amount of weight gradually increase the amount of weight you're putting through your leg instead of going from, the crutches are here today, gone tomorrow, because that creates so many issues for people.
Yeah, I actually totally forgot about that, but they were definitely my in-person PT was pushing me off to like get off the crutches as soon as I could. And I remember like I struggled to walk forever. I know me and you even got on a call at like impromptu one day because you're just like, can we just work on this because it's like not clicking for you for some reason. And then I actually remember it was like Halloween. I finally started to walk like a normal person again for the first time in months. So yeah, crutches is a big deal of like moving from completely non-weight bearing to like assisted weight bearing to like I can finally walk like a normal person again.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I'm sure it wasn't a coincidence because I know Halloween's your favorite. So I'm sure you were extra motivated to get out there. Um, Talk about a little bit of feeling like, in terms of just the model, like you talked about, hey, walking, and I know we did a lot with form feedback and deadlifting and kind of lifting in a lot of ways that even maybe you hadn't done since college necessarily. What do you feel like? Because one thing we get a lot of questions about is how are you going to look at my form? How's that going to work? And that's a question we have prior to people joining, but it's one we never get once people join. So talk a little bit about how this model worked for you from a programming standpoint, but then also from a form feedback and that standpoint as well.
I loved having a to-do list, check the box kind of thing when I went to the gym. So the program itself and like having the list of things, here's your order, here are the things you need to do, and being able to like literally check them off one by one was so up my alley as a like super type A person. I loved that. And like while I was going through it, if I was like confused or there was new stuff or whatever, like all the videos that accompanied it to show you like what you're doing was super helpful. And for me, like I tried to post at least especially with newer things, all my videos of me doing them. So that's how you get your feedback is you submit videos into the programmed app of your exercises. And I definitely like, I would say like, I never really, I feel like I didn't really question the feedback part. But I also like had kind of seen stuff like this before at like in college, but it is literally all within the app. Like you submit the videos, Tommy, you obviously go in and like can like draw lines and show like what's working, what's not working, or what the error is, or even just like explaining the feedback. And it's all within the app. So you can literally see what you're doing wrong at the exact point because there's like a screenshot almost of like what you were, where you were at with the like directional like corrections with like lines and all that type of stuff. Super helpful. And even like sometimes if I was like, I don't know what this means, I would just ask questions like, what does that mean exactly? Or like, what am I doing wrong? It's super two-way communication. It's very visual. If you're like, I can't just do corrections with words. Like there are literal visuals like that show you what's going on too. And I think it's like that was great. Like I know there were things, even just minor things of like, oh, like try to slow down when you're doing something that you wouldn't necessarily see unless you submitted a video. Because like sometimes the cadence was too fast or just like slight tweaks and things. Like you can see that all in the video just to get that feedback. I don't know. I think I love that. Like I actually wish I had an app to do this all the time for my general workouts now because I loved that so much. So I thought it was really good. I definitely like would recommend like that app even post surgery for recovery or post surgery even after you're like done with all that because it was just like really nice to just have the list and know everything you're doing.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that's so key of like we have people that'll start with us and have been struggling with their step downs for a while or have been doing lunges for months. And it's, the little subtle tweaks that we're able to make with that form feedback seems to make a big difference. And I think it's something that we're able to see a lot more often on that slow motion video. And even I think helps you learn in a way that you can take with you where filming yourself and kind of reviewing it and submitting it to us, you start to see what we're seeing because you have that bank of feedback. And I think that's a really helpful thing too.
Yep, I completely agree with that.
You talked a little bit, about, okay, progressing 6 months and then obviously getting further out and getting back to volleyball. What do you feel like, maybe surprised you the most in the later stages of the kind of return to sport with the moving through the running and how that progressed, particularly when we worked through single limb jumping and the cutting and pivoting pieces there?
Um, I guess like two things. So first, I would say I felt like the first block or two before I got to like running and jumping, I think to me mentally just felt like so long because it was like very much like base building of like getting your strength back. And that's not an easy thing to do by any means. And especially like I was so atrophied, it literally just looked like my leg was like just a bone at that point. It was so bad. So it was a ton of work to get like back to where I needed to be. So I think for me, like once we got to later phases, it was fun and like exciting to see like the variation and how quickly things could change. Sorry, I have cats going psycho in my background now.
That's okay. It's okay. I remember them from the videos.
Yeah, they're still crazy. But it was exciting, like once you got into the later blocks of like the variation of things and how quickly you got to do more stuff because you had built such a strong base. And I think the other piece of it that was really interesting that I found was how much confidence I had by the time I got to running and jumping. Like I remember like maybe the first time I would try to do those things, I was a little nervous, not necessarily running, but jumping. I was a little like, oh gosh, here we go. But I also knew like I had so much strength that I had built up and so many other things I had done to get me to that point where I was like really confident in it. And like once I progressed down like pivoting and sprinting and all of that, like I feel like I didn't have any hesitation with like, all right, let's go, let's do this. Just because there was so much confidence I already built in like doing step downs and doing all these other things that once I got to that, like my confidence was high, my strength was like high, like everything had tested to get to a point where it's like, you can actually do this. And then once you did it like one time, you're like, all right, cool. Like I got this. Like I'm not scared to try this again. It was literally just like the first time you're like, oh, I don't know. And then you're like good to go.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think you explained that so well. And one of the things we talk about is really it's like an ounce of prevention is really worth a pound of cure when it comes to those things, right? Where like we have people who, if you start in the later stages and you've been told to jump without a criteria, right? And that's where we talked about like, hey, you've been given an agility ladder before you have the strength to do it. If you continue doing that, you're kind of eroding your confidence because you're being told you can do something, you're trying it, you're figuring out a way to do it, but it doesn't feel right. And your body knows what's going on, but you're like, okay, pushing yourself. So we talk to so many people who are like, my PT says I have to work on my confidence. My PT says, mental side. But it's like, if you don't have a strength test, there's no discussing mental side. There's no discussing confidence because you don't know, right? Versus when we test you, and in your case, and most people's cases, right? They fail that test multiple times, right? And I shouldn't even use the word fail, but it's like they don't pass the return to jump, return to run criteria the first time they do it.
Mm-hmm.
They've gone through the test, they know the criteria, they know what they're working towards. They fail it. In your case, because we started from such a hole with being non-weight bearing for so long, took you 3, 4 tests to be able to jump and then run. But then when you did pass it, you knew, okay, I've been working to this for a long time, right? This is what the criteria I've been working to get to. I passed it. Yeah, I'm scared to jump the first time because it's new, but I know that that's what I've been working towards. And then you do it, and then you feel it and say, that builds your confidence because you've seen yourself be successful. And I think, the way we progressed you was we're progressing you 5 to 7% out of your comfort zone every time where, it's each level. First time you jump is gonna be the first time you jump. First time you run is gonna be the first time you run. But if you've gone just up to that point before and you've been tested, you can be successful, and that'll be really helpful in building your confidence at each level.
Yep.
Um, Talk a little bit about, because you mentioned your workouts now, you mentioned volleyball. Talk a little bit about where you are now, and how you feel, what you're able to do, and how you feel overall.
So I passed my return to sport test, I think in like November of 23 or December of 23, something like that. But I didn't really have an opportunity to go like 100% back into sports. I started coaching again. And I just didn't have like an opportunity to like really go all in on it. But by spring of last year, I definitely started playing again. I was a little nervous. But I started playing volleyball again. I mean, I was biking and running, like even before I passed my return to sport test, which was so nice to just have something that I could do that I felt like athletic again. So like for me, like once I started biking, I was like, oh my gosh, my heart is happy again. But once I got back to volleyball, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like a revived person. So for me, I last summer started playing volleyball again. It's like beer league, bar league kind of thing. I played, and I saw this in the comments as someone was asking about brace culture, but I played my first 3 games without my brace, but I'm in sand. And I like felt my foot slide one time and I got super freaked out. And ever since then, I have been in full like Don John ACL brace. For me, like that's just, I like the confidence that it gives me of like, I will full out sprint, like roll around on the ground, like pivot, like I have no hesitation when I have my brace on. And for me, like, it's just like my security blanket that I don't like feel like I'm just very, very like conscious of that. And I also know like I'm super competitive and I can't like turn it off. Like I can go play volleyball casually. And this is why I also wanted to wait until I was like fully ready to go play again. Because there is no like shutting down. Like I'm 100% like all in on it. So for me, like I've been fully back. I was playing by the end of the summer, I was playing like 3 to 4 days a week on different teams. And then by fall, I was into indoor and I was playing at least once or twice a week indoor. Had a little bit of a break and now I'm back into indoor now. So back to volleyball. And again, I'm playing like 1 to 2 days a week. And yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at. It's just been 100% competitive. I will say like at first I was a little bit hesitant and like it was more like not hesitant. It was like my reaction was delayed. It wasn't like I physically couldn't do things. I think it was just like more mental getting back into the game.
Totally.
But now I feel like my hesitations are gone. Like my reaction is like back. I feel not much different now than when I was playing a couple months ago. I feel like pretty much the same person. It's just I have a brace that I continuously wear.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think that, feeling like you can get back to feeling how you felt before this injury is tremendous. And that I think is what a lot of people are told, that, hey, your knee is never the same, even after an ACL injury, right? And then when we look at you having the ACL injury with the menisco, very unique meniscal capsular repair, and the amount of non-weight bearing, it's like, hey, you did have to have a unique recovery. You did have to put in that time. You'd have to put in an uncommon amount of work, but you can get back to a place where you're, like you said, confidently rolling around, playing all the time, doing anything. And I think that's a testament to all the hard work you put in, but obviously the effort and planning and the time you dedicated to it, um, which really matters. And I think it feels like a lot of effort and time, and like you said, it feels really long, right? We call it that, like, valley of boredom in the beginning, where, like, before you get to jumping and running, but especially in your case because you have the non-weight bearing period. But in the grand scheme of things, you're going to be playing volleyball for the rest of your life, right? So you face this head on, and for you it was 18 months, but you're able to put this in your rearview mirror now and be like, okay, I can do whatever I want. I can feel confident and play and enjoy this, for the rest of my life, which is a big difference.
Yeah. Like I genuinely, I know someone who's returned to sport after their ACL now to volleyball, and I just like can't even imagine, because she did not go through this. Like I can't even imagine how like I just honestly, like 1,000% of like me coming back to sports was, and coming back to volleyball was like 100% this program. Like I don't think I would have the confidence, or I would have already torn my other knee or the same knee, because I was in such a bad place with my in-person PT of them thinking I should be in a different path versus like our program that we did. I would not be as successful in doing sports as I am today without like this program. So
No, I so appreciate that. And I think it is unfortunately, we always say, hey, traditional PT is not set up for ACLers, right? It's not something that the traditional session-based model matches with what you need from a program, as managing the loads, getting you back to walking, getting you back to traveling for work after being non-weight bearing for 8 weeks, those type of things. It's just not commiserate with a session-based model. But then, when you add the meniscal repair on top of it, I think like you said, it's not a knock on anyone. It's just a uniquely this model works for this type of injury much better than a session based injury does. And one of the things that you mentioned, I think, with talking about return to sport and feeling like, hey, your confidence, you have to get used to things. We tested you right at every level, and you were 100%, above 95% on all hop testing, on all strength testing. But no doubt, like we talked about when you started jumping or running, it's a progression, right? And I think that's a key thing that people don't realize often as well. That same way we took you through a run progression, same way we took you through a jumping progression, a return to sport progression is just that, right? And even if you're that first day, you're not going to be the same, volleyball player you were, when you played last 18 months ago. But you're taking the steps. You have met the criteria athletically, and now you got to get back into the game and gradually build that up, the same way you have. Last question for you, just if you had any advice for ACLers going through this, and specifically those with a meniscal repair, what would be probably your biggest piece of advice as someone who's been through it and successfully come back from it?
mm, give yourself grace, because you're going to see people move through ACL rehab a lot faster than you. You're going to see people that are walking day one, and you're going to wish you were walking. I know I did. Definitely give yourself some grace of like, your road is different and it's longer, unfortunately. But it's not an endless path. There is a like light at the end of the tunnel. Like, you will get back to what you want to do if you put in the work and you do the right things. And I think honestly, like, at least for me, like the right thing was definitely like this program. If I were to somehow tear my ACL again or have like another knee injury, like there is no doubt that I would literally come back to you and be like, hi, this happened. How can we do this? Because that was genuinely like the key to my success of getting back to sports. Like I literally cannot imagine what situation I would be in today if I didn't go through this program, if I didn't partner with you, and I didn't like really buckle down and like dedicate myself to basically 2 years of being a slave to the gym to get myself back to where I needed to be. But like giving yourself some grace and then doing the right things for yourself in the long run of like waiting until your body is ready and just knowing that like your path is different and that's totally okay. It's just you have to mentally be ready to know like it's not going to be the same as someone who just tore their ACL.
Yeah, that's such a great point, and I think such a great perspective, and something that like, I try to reflect here is like, I never want to be like, hey, this one exercise works, it's like a magic bullet, right? And I would have never pretended that, hey, you start with us in the beginning during non-weight bearing period, and we're gonna have you do an agility ladder, 3-4 months after you were just non-weight bearing for 2 months. It's just not reality, right? It's just not realistic. And we see so many ACLers who, if you had an ACL surgery and a meniscal repair and you're not weight bearing for 2 months, you will not return to sport if you try to match someone's timeline who did not have a meniscal repair. If you try to say, hey, at 6 months, I want to do what they're doing or what ACLers do, what the protocol says, you just won't get back. You'll never catch up if you keep trying to enter at this level. But if you take the slow path that you're actually on and do it right, what's right for you, you can get to the same place again. Like in your position now, it doesn't matter that you had a meniscal repair, but it mattered at 6 months, at 8 months, at even 9, 10 months. But now you can put it in your rearview mirror and look back on it. It's because of all the hard work you put in and the patience as well. So yeah, I appreciate you joining me. This was super helpful, super insightful. I think, especially for a unique recovery like yours. So anything else you'd like to share, feel free. But if not, Kaylee, I appreciate it. And anyone that can, I'll be posting this to our page as well. And we'll also put in the highlights where we have all the other interviews we've done with graduates. So yeah, I'll tag you in that. And then yeah, let me know anything else I can help you with. And hopefully all your me hearing from you in the future is just more successes and more athletic things you've done and not any sort of re-injury or anything like that.
Fingers crossed. And then yeah, if anybody that's watching this has questions and they want to reach out, like you are more than willing to contact me on Instagram. Like happy to answer questions, or you just need someone to commiserate with you of your pain of going through this, or just before you're even getting started, please feel free to contact me. I've literally been there. So thank you so much. I appreciate you having me join today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kaylee. I'll talk to you
Sounds
soon.
good.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.